Welcome to another deep dive. Looks like our listener has been prepping for some serious language learning. English vocabulary and idioms this time. We'll be looking closely at noteworthy, piece of cake, breakdown, and loquacious. I think we'll find some interesting stuff along the way.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. Language is always full of surprises. Ready to jump in?
Absolutely. Let's start with noteworthy. Seems pretty straightforward, but is there something more to it?
You're right. The core idea is about importance, but it also has this idea of distinction. It's not just important, it's something that stands out, something that deserves attention. It makes you wonder, why do we need to specifically label something noteworthy?
Interesting point. Is it like we're telling others it's important to remember? Like making a mental note or bookmarking something in our minds?
Exactly. Think of it like taking notes. You wouldn't write down everything, would you? Just the key points, the noteworthy ones, the ones you need to remember.
Right. Makes sense. But then what about words like notable, remarkable, significant, or outstanding? Do we just pick whichever we like? Or are there subtle differences?
Well, those little differences are actually important. Notable might be something well known, while remarkable could be something unusual. Significant means it has a bigger impact, and outstanding really emphasizes excellence.
Wow, so many ways to say something's important. Okay, let me try this out. If a scientist wins an award for outstanding contributions, that means they didn't just do good work. It was really exceptional, right?
Right. Outstanding really captures that level of achievement. Choosing the right word really makes a difference.
Totally. Okay, moving on to piece of cake, which I'm guessing isn't literally about cake.
You got it. It's an idiom, a phrase that means something different from the individual words.
Right. So what does it mean?
It means something's really easy to do, something you can do without much effort at all.
And here's a fun fact. The phrase comes from 19th century America, believe it or not. There were these cakewalk dancing contests, and guess what the prize was? Cake.
Exactly. A cake. Over time, winning these contests became associated with ease, so saying something was a piece of cake meant it was easy peasy.
I love how language has these little stories behind it. It makes it so much more interesting to learn.
For sure. And we have so many ways to say something's easy, straightforward, simple, effortless. It's like English is telling us to relax, some things are easy.
I like that. Sometimes we need that reminder, right?
Definitely. Okay, now for a phrase that can be a little tricky. Break down. It seems to have a few different meanings.
Oh, it does. Break down can mean a machine stops working, like a car breaking down by the side of the road.
Uh-oh, I can picture it now.
Yeah.
Not a fun situation. But wait, doesn't break down also mean someone's having an emotional breakdown, like they're falling apart?
You're right. It can mean that too.
Right.
The word really reflects the idea of something breaking into pieces, doesn't it?
It does. So we've got the machine breaking, someone emotionally breaking.
Yeah.
And isn't there also breaking down information, like explaining something complex? Yes, exactly that. Simplifying a complicated idea by breaking it down.
Okay, so that's at least 3 meanings. Any tips for remembering them all?
Think of breakdown as separating something into parts. Whether it's a car engine, an emotional state, or a complex idea, something's being divided.
I get it. So for synonyms, we could say give way or collapse when something physical breaks, and explain or simplify when it's about ideas.
Perfect, you got it.
Awesome. All right, last one for this part of our deep dive, loquacious. It always makes me think of someone who loves to talk, but it feels like more than just talkative, right?
You're right. Loquacious means they talk a lot, but they're also articulate and expressive. It's like they're really fluent and comfortable with language. It goes beyond just chatting.
It's like they've got this endless supply of words and they love to use them, telling stories, sharing anecdotes, keeping the conversation flowing.
Exactly. And they do it with this energy, this passion. It's like they draw you in with their words. They paint pictures with language.
Okay, I'm starting to see the difference. So it's not just the quantity of words, but how they use them. But how about words like talkative, chatty, garrulous, or verbose? Are those all the same?
They're all related for sure, but with subtle differences. Talkative is the most general. Chatty means more casual and lighthearted. Garrulous can be negative, like someone who talks too much without thinking, and verbose is someone who uses way more words than they need to.
So loquacious is like the most skilled kind of talkativeness. It's like a talent for using language effectively.
Yes, exactly. It's the difference between just talking and being a truly engaging speaker.
I love it. Loquacious is definitely going in my vocabulary toolbox.
Welcome back. This deep dive into English vocabulary is really fascinating, isn't it?
Totally. It's like we're uncovering these hidden layers of meaning. The more words we learn, the better we can express ourselves.
Right. It's like having a toolbox full of different tools. The more you have, the better equipped you are.
Exactly. And that's what we're doing here, giving our listeners the tools they need to communicate better. So let's go back to noteworthy. We said it highlights things that are important to remember. But what makes something noteworthy in the first place? Is it personal, or are there like objective reasons?
That's a good question. It's a bit of both, I'd say. Some things are objectively noteworthy, like big historical events or scientific discoveries,
Mhm.
but it's also subjective, right? What's noteworthy to one person might not be to another.
It's like everyone has their own filter based on their experiences and interests. A history buff might find a newly discovered document super noteworthy, but someone else might not care at all.
Exactly. That's what makes conversations so interesting. We all bring different perspectives,
Hmm.
and those perspectives shape what we find noteworthy. What kinds of things stand out to you as noteworthy?
Ooh, that's a tough one. There are so many. I think the most noteworthy experiences are the ones that challenge us and push us out of our comfort zones. Those moments of triumph or even failure that really shape us.
That's really insightful. Those moments, good or bad, really stick with us, don't they?
They do. They become like these markers in our memory, reminders of what we've learned and overcome. Okay, let's switch gears to piece of cake. That phrase reminds us that things aren't always a struggle.
I love that. Makes you think, does thinking something's going to be easy actually make it easier?
That's an interesting thought. It's all about mindset, right? If you go into something with confidence, you're more likely to succeed.
Right. There's actually a lot of research on this. If we believe something will be hard, we give up more easily. But if we think it's a piece of cake, we're more likely to keep going, even when things get tough.
So maybe the trick is to convince ourselves that everything's a piece of cake. Okay, maybe not everything, but starting with a positive attitude can't hurt.
Exactly. Even if it's not actually easy, that mindset can make the journey more enjoyable. All right, let's move on to breakdown. We talk about machines, emotions, and ideas all breaking down. What connects those different meanings?
Well, it's like they're all about taking something apart, right? Like deconstructing it to see how it works.
Yes, it's about understanding the whole by looking at the parts. And breaking things down is so important for learning and growing. When we learn something new, it can feel overwhelming, but breaking it into smaller pieces makes it easier to grasp.
It's like learning a new language. It seems impossible at first, but then you break it down into grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, and it becomes more manageable.
That's a great example. And even when it's a negative thing, like a breakdown, analyzing the situation can help us regain control.
Right. Instead of panicking, we can say, okay, this is broken, but how do we fix it? That can be really empowering.
Okay, last one for this section, loquacious. We said it describes someone who loves to talk and is good at it. But is that the same as being a good communicator? That's a great question. Loquacious people are often good with words, but true communication is more than just talking. It's about listening, empathy, and connecting with the other person.
I agree. It's not just about getting your own point across, it's about understanding the other person's point of view. And that can be hard, especially with so many distractions around us these days.
You're right, it's easy to get lost in our own thoughts. But to really communicate, we need to slow down and listen to the other person.
So, being a good communicator isn't just about being loquacious, it's about being present, attentive, and really listening.
Well said. It's about making sure everyone feels heard and understood. So how can we get better at that?
I think it starts with self-awareness. Are we really listening or just waiting for our turn to talk? And are we genuinely interested in what the other person has to say?
Those are great questions to ask ourselves. It's also about developing empathy, trying to understand the other person's feelings.
That's where real connection happens, when we go beyond just words and create a space for understanding.
Exactly. Even the smallest interactions can have a big impact.
And we're back. It's amazing how much we've learned just from looking at these four expressions: noteworthy, piece of cake, breakdown, and loquacious.
It really shows how much depth there is to language. We haven't just defined these phrases, we've explored their history and even their psychology.
I know, right? It's like we've unlocked a whole new level of communication. But before we wrap up, any practical tips for actually using these expressions?
Well, first remember that language is all about expression. So don't be afraid to experiment with these words and phrases and make them your own.
It's like trying on a new style, right? You got to find what feels right. And, I think using more descriptive language can actually boost your confidence.
Absolutely. The words you choose can make a big difference in how you come across. Think about it. Which sounds better? That was a good presentation. Or that was a noteworthy presentation filled with remarkable insights.
Ooh, the second one definitely sounds more impressive. It shows you really paid attention.
Exactly. That brings us to another key point: context. Using the right word at the right time is really important. Like, you wouldn't say that math problem was a piece of cake if you just spent hours struggling with it.
Haha, definitely not. You'd sound a little silly. But in the right situation, piece of cake can be a fun way to show that something's easy.
For sure. And don't forget about breakdown. It's not always about things falling apart. It can be a helpful way to communicate. If you need to explain something complex, break it down into smaller, simpler pieces.
It's like building a bridge, right? Start with small steps.
Exactly. Make it easy for people to follow your train of thought. Now, when it comes to loquacious, remember your audience. It's great to be articulate, but don't forget to listen too. Give others a chance to speak.
It's a two-way street, right? You got to listen as much as you talk. And, this whole deep dive has really shown how important it is to have fun with language. Don't be afraid to play around with words and find your own style.
I agree. Language is a lifelong journey. There's always something new to discover.
That's the best part. This deep dive has been awesome, and I'm already looking forward to exploring more words with you and our listeners.